Hello, everyone. My name is Becky Durst, and I will be your moderator for tonight. This evening, we will start our clinic with our bug watch. We'll hear from Heather Felton, who will talk about harvesting and storing root vegetables, and then Barbara will wrap up tonight with information about harvesting and storing herbs. These topics are all ways to help you think about how to preserve as much of your summer bounty as possible to use all winter through. Roseanne is going to get us started tonight with our bug watch. This week, we're featuring the assassin bug. These are amazing beneficial insects that I'm always happy to see.
Well, thanks, Becky. Yeah, I was excited about this bug. It has kind of a scary name, but it is in fact a very beneficial insect predator for our gardens. There's about 160 species of these in North America and about 50 in Virginia alone. So that was kind of cool. And many are commonly found around our house, such as the wheel bug, the airless crustacea. These assassin bugs essentially have a three-stage life cycle, similar to a lot of the bugs we've discussed. You have the egg, the nymph, and the adult. And the adult stage is the one that overwinters. So they grow to about 1.5 inches or so, and they usually have only one generation per year. If you are someone who inspects your plants for pests, you can distinguish the eggs of the assassin bug, which are grouped in this hexagon form, as you can see in the lower picture there. And they look similar to little wine flasks with a fancy stopper, so on the plant surface. Kind of a cute description of them. Thankfully, we don't have the kissing bug group of this, which is found in Mexico, Central America, and South America, because it comes out at night and feeds on human and animal blood. It's like, oh, we don't want that. For conservation, the assassin bugs are encouraged because they are a biological pest control. So they're a very effective component for your integrated pest management. Okay, and they can help contribute immensely to pest population control when they're found in abundance. They actively hunt prey on various types of vegetation, such as trees and weeds and bushes and gardens. The prey can include a variety of caterpillars, such as the gypsy moths, eastern tent caterpillars, fall webworms that we're seeing, also the soft fly larvae, aphids, which we have a lot of, and beetles and their larvae, and such as the pesky Japanese beetles we have to deal with. Unfortunately, the assassin bugs themselves are prey for birds, rodents, spiders, and even other assassin bugs, particularly when they're in that nymph stage. Some of the species are generalized and will only eat a variety of insects, while others are specialized, so they only prey on one type of insect. These can be considered pests at times, but only when they bite humans. So it's not recommended to handle them. I don't know how many people want to go out and play with them, but they may be cute, but they're just not cuddly. The pain is caused by their toxic saliva, which is injected to immobilize and digest the internal organs of their prey. So I found that kind of interesting in my research. So how do we encourage these wonderful insects to help in our gardens? Well, first, consider growing flowers and plants in your garden that attract a variety of insects. Avoid any broad spectrum insecticides if you're going to use them. If you're going to be using them, be sure to read all the information to be sure you aren't killing off the good beneficial insects along with the pesky ones. Unfortunately, unlike other beneficial stuff we've talked about, such as the green lacewing, assassin bugs are not available commercially. So we have to encourage them with our gardening practices. So here are some of the resources I use. Definitely a bug to look up and read about because it was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I need to draw some of these in for the sawfly larvae that have decimated my hibiscus and my creeping jenny. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Roseanne. Our next presenter is Heather, who is here to talk about harvesting and storing root vegetables from your garden. Over to you, Heather.
Thanks, Becky. So tonight I'm talking about harvesting and storing root vegetables. It's a variety of different vegetables that I've grown before with a couple of sections and that are pretty common in most people's home vegetable gardens. Carrots, which I've never grown successfully because my soil has too much clay in it and they are sad little stunted things. but some people are successful, and they can be harvested any time of the year that they're big enough to eat. You can store them in the refrigerator with no problem, but definitely keep them in a different, crisper drawer than your apples, because the apples produce ethylene, and that will give your carrots a really bitter taste. And then in the winter, you can mulch over your carrots to keep them from freezing and harvest them all through the winter as needed. Beets and turnips, mature roots, beets, turnips, and also radishes are generally ready 6 to 8 weeks after they've been planted. With beets, they tend to sort of poke up, the top of them kind of poke up over the soil. That's always a good clue to let you check them out and see if they're big enough. The beets, turnips, and radishes also keep a couple weeks in the refrigerators. I store them in a cool, humid place. I also, to make the beets, especially, and radishes last longer, I pickle them. For beets, I'll roast them and then pickle them and have them all through the winter. The same with radishes. Potatoes, when your potatoes are ready, let them stay in the ground for a week or two to set their skins. That's it with regular white potatoes, and also with sweet potatoes, which I've grown. Getting them cured well is very important to making them last longer. When you pull them up and store them in a well-ventilated place for a couple of weeks, don't wash the dirt off them. Keep the dirt on them until you're ready to use them. That also helps preserve them, and they'll last longer there. And don't ever store potatoes in the refrigerator. They get really starchy and not delicious. Onions, when the tops of your onions kind of dry out and fall over, that's when you should harvest them. You also want to kind of cure them like you do with the potatoes. Keep them in a cool, dry place out of the sun. If you have just kind of some kind of a dry rack, to keep them up off the ground, that's really helpful. And then the bulbs will start to turn brown or tan or kind of purple if they're a red onion, and that's when you know that they're cured. Store them in ventilated bags or boxes, something with holes, mesh sacks, something like that. Yellow onions will last the longest, red onions the shortest. And I have some friends who 1 year had this like bumper crop of onions, and they actually chopped them and froze them in like 1 cup plastic bags. And then so they had onions all year long. I think a couple of weeks ago we had a talk on freezing vegetables, and it works really well with onions as well. Garlic is my favorite. Garlic is a little different. We're talking about, vegetables that you harvest in the fall. Garlic you plant in the late fall or early winter, and it overwinters and then will sprout in the spring. And when the leaves turn yellow and fall over, that's when you harvest it. You really want to get it drying in place with good circulation. You can put it on a rack, or you can braid the leaves together like you see in like fancy Italian restaurants and stuff. And it's great to have garlic in like large quantities all year. And it's just fun because when we do it, it's fun because you have something kind of right away sprouting in your garden in the spring. There are a lot of good resources online for harvesting and storing your root vegetables. South Dakota State Extension has a great page, and as does Iowa State.
That was fantastic. I have had really good luck storing garlic in just like a mesh bag, just hanging off a hook from my pantry door. That is so much better than like a little basket or having anything even for me.
Yeah, it gives it that good air circulation, which is so key in keeping it fresh.
Right. I feel like root vegetables are one of those things that we always feel like, I don't have a root cellar, so what am I going to do? Like you feel like you need something special. Right. And with some things you do, and but like if you want to keep your beets or your carrots or whatever, it would be beneficial to have something root cellar-ish for like extended periods of time. But roots store so well just in the fridge or just in the pantry.
Yeah,
like,
just in we had this bumper crop of sweet potatoes a couple of years ago, and our basement's really cool, so we just kept them in like a box in the basement. Yeah, when we wanted to use them, we just go grab a couple and wash them off. It was, it was a lot easier than I expected it to be.
And yeah, it's shocking, like how actually
Yeah.
not complicated it is. Thank you so much, Heather. That was great.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Barbara Whitehart, who is here to share information about harvesting and storing herbs. Over to you, Barbara.
All right, thank you, Becky. So today we're going to talk about harvesting and storing herbs. Let's talk about first the benefits and uses of herbs. So obviously we can cook with herbs. They can be a quick and simple way to add some interesting flavors to foods, and that's without adding salt, sugar, or fat, which is sometimes a good thing. Also, a lot of the herbs, both fresh and dried, have phytonutrients, and those may help us protect us with chronic diseases such as diabetes or heart disease, even some cancers. Herbs are really easy to grow. You can grow them in not a lot of space. So I have a little picture of like window boxes there. I know we all don't live in half timbered houses here, but small containers, small pots, they kind of grow anywhere you like. Even they can be, intermingled in your landscaping. Scented products, so you can use herbs to add scent to your home or as natural ingredients to your laundry. And then finally, decor. So you can even decorate with dried herbs. You can use them in place of room air fresheners, as potpourri, as a linen closet sachet, or in dried wreaths or arrangements. So really, having an herb garden is a pretty easy thing to have. It doesn't matter where you live and the kind of space that you live in, and it'll enhance your health as well as your diet. So let's talk about harvesting. To me, this is the best part of growing herbs. First, we should talk about all the various parts of herb plants that can be used. So on this slide, you see that we can harvest leaves, flowers, seeds, and even the roots of herbs. So different parts of the plant, they can be harvested at different times, which I've included here, and we're going to talk about those one by one. So for the leaves, let's talk about herbs that are grown for their foliage or their leaves. Example of this would be rosemary, dill, sage, oregano, parsley, even bay or basil, chives certainly too, which are pictured there. So these should be harvested just before they flower. And the reason for this is that some of these can develop a little off flavor if they're harvested after flowering begins. So chive and basil are known for that. This is also when the oils that are responsible for flavor and aroma are at their peak. So you want to harvest these early in the morning after the dew has evaporated, and make sure that you're careful. We'll talk about that in a minute. Herbs contain volatile oils which escape. That's why they smell really nice if you bruise them or you're grabbing them out of your garden. So you want to handle them a little gently to avoid bruising them too much, and you want to avoid any that are discolored or damaged. So flowers. Some herbs are grown for the flowers, such as burrage or starflower. That's what that picture is there. And chamomile even, which is really easy to grow. So you would want to harvest these before full flower for best results. And then we have herbs that are harvested for seeds. So coriander, dill, or anise, that is pictured here, and even caraway. So herbs grown for seeds should be harvested as the seed pods change in color. They might go from green to brown to gray, but you want to harvest them before they release the seeds, before they open and release the seeds. And then finally, we have roots on this slide. So some of those are chicory, ginseng, golden seal, and bloodroot. This is a picture of ginger here. And these should be harvested in the fall after the foliage fades. So a couple of notes on storing herbs. So this is going to be very similar to what we were just talking about with root vegetables, but we want to handle herbs gently to avoid the bruising, which we talked about. We want to refrigerate any unwashed fresh herbs in an open or in a perforated plastic bag. They sell those special bags that are designed for harvesting or storing vegetables and herbs. You want to store them that way if you can use them within a few days. But if you want to extend the freshness for a week or even more, you can sniff off the stem diagonally and place them in a tall glass with an inch of water. And actually this photo on this slide is a picture of basil from my garden and my refrigerator. So very easy to do. I just stuck it in a mason jar, but I've used glasses, regular drinking glasses, or even vases, small vases, and it works really well. So if you want to prepare any of these herbs that you're storing in your fridge for serving, you just want to rinse them off under cool water. You want to remove all the dirt, of course, shake off all the excess moisture, and then maybe pat them with a clean towel or a clean paper towel. And you can also use one of those salad spinners if you have one, as long as you kind of be a little gentle with it. Some of those can get some crazy speed on them, but that's another way that you can use to dry them off to use. So if you don't want to use all of your herbs at once, you might want to preserve them. So we're going to talk about several ways that you can preserve herbs. So first is you can freeze them. So to do this, you would rinse them under cool water, you'd shake and pat them dry. Maybe you'd wrap a few of the sprigs or leaves in freezer wrap, put it in a freezer bag, and you can like label that and put it in your freezer, and it would be good for up to 6 months. You can also chop up your herbs, place them in an ice cube tray and freeze them. And you can use those as you can pop out the ice cubes, and we have a picture here, and store them in a plastic bag so that they don't dry out in your freezer and you have them to use anytime you want. So another method for freezing is to spread the herbs loosely on a cooking sheet to freeze. And then after they're frozen, you transfer those into a large plastic bag and seal. And especially herbs that are used for leaves, if you freeze them, they will lose their structure. So you have to use them with cooked dishes, otherwise the look won't be very appetizing, but the flavor will be there. So roots, though, such as ginger, store fabulously in the freezer. So you just snap off a piece that you want to use a micrograter to grate it into your dish, and it works great. I do that all the time. And if you don't like to freeze herbs, you can make flavored oils or vinegars. There's a picture here of that. I'm not going to provide any recipes for this today, but just make sure to use commercially prepared vinegar that has at least 5% acidity. So this means you don't make your own vinegar for this, just because you really want to make sure that the quality and acidity is correct. So we have a few more options for preserving on this slide, along with a really pretty picture, just like we were just talking about with garlic and some of the root vegetables. Lots of people are familiar with dried herbs, similar to what you might find in the grocery store or your favorite spice store. So generally, dried herbs are more potent flavor-wise than fresh. So they're maybe 3 to 4 times stronger than fresh herbs. So the rough yields of these are included here. This is not exact. That's why I put the little about sign right in front of them. But a good rule for this is about 1 teaspoon of dried herbs for every 1 tablespoon of fresh herbs that are needed in a recipe. In fact, 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, so that's about the right ratio if you have to substitute in a recipe. Air drying is a traditional method of herb preservation. If the herbs are clean, don't wash them. Otherwise, if they do need to be washed, though, obviously rinse them, shake them off, and spread them out to dry on paper towels or clean towels. And then remove any dead or the damaged foliage, and then tie them into small bundles and hang them upside down like you see in the photo here. Make sure that the bunches are relatively small and loose to allow for good air circulation, and that'll ensure that you get good even drying. You really want to dry herbs indoors, like we were talking about in our last presentation. A large empty closet, attic, an unused corner of your room is good for this, because UV rays from the sun and moisture from dew or frost can really discolor and reduce the quality of your dried herbs. And as we talked about before, drying herbs can look quite attractive as decor. So maybe you hang them in your kitchen and it becomes part of your decor as well. Some herbs are easier to dry than others. There are some leaves, though, that have a little bit more water content, like basil, tarragon, and some of the mint family leaves that may mold or discolor if not dried quickly. So just be sure that you're monitoring that. So to air dry herbs with seeds, tie the herbs in small bundles and suspend it in a little paper bag with holes punched in the side. And you suspend that bag in a dark area, again with good air circulation, and then you can collect the seeds when they're dry. You can also use your oven or your food dehydrator to dry herbs. You spread the herbs on cookie sheets and you dry at the lowest temperature setting possible for your oven. For your dehydrator, you can just follow the directions that came with it. There's also recipes that come that you can look up for dehydrators, but effectively those are equal kinds of ways to dry. And then finally, you can even use your microwave. Now, I haven't personally tried this, but I think I want to with some of my herbs that are going to come out of the garden here soon this season. So you would lay a single layer of clean, dry leaves, so washed and dried. You would put them between paper towels and then put them in the microwave for 1 to 2 minutes on high power. You'll have to experiment with this a little bit because the time to dry will vary with the moisture content of the herb and with the wattage of the microwave oven, of course. So you want to let those cool, and then you want to see if they're brittle. So the whole idea here is that we get to brittle and dry so that we can use them dried. And you can just keep putting them in the microwave at 30-second intervals until you attain that. So speaking of drying and using them, let's talk about storage. So with whatever method you use to preserve, you're going to want to use them. So after your herbs get brittle and they crumble easily, separate the leaves from their stems and put them in spice containers. Now your spice containers can be any sort of rigid container, glass or plastic. You can even reuse old spice jars. I run mine through the dishwasher with the glass ones anyway, and I have no problem using them for other spices or herbs. So to preserve their flavor though, you really want to avoid crushing the leaves until you're ready to use them. That's why they say that spices that are and herbs that are bought in the grocery store have a very limited shelf life, despite what they say on the little date that's on there for best flavor. So you want to store your herbs in a cabinet, basically, so a cool, dry place. You don't want any light in there, moisture or heat. And most herbs can be kept for a year if stored properly. With this one, I'll end with my reference slide, and that ends our presentation on harvesting and storing herbs. Thank you.
That was amazing. That was fantastic. What that was so much information. It was so good. I have gotten very stuck in the rut of just hanging my herbs. Fun to see, like, oh wow, there's actually other options. Oh right, I do actually own a dehydrator. I could be using that, like, or freezing is something I've only ever done with ginger. So it'd be actually fun to try that and see if the flavors are different.
Mm-hmm.
Some people swear by only freezing basil.
I chop up a lot of things, and I also just put them in oil, and I also freeze that. And then
that's a good idea.
You don't have to really worry about it sitting on the counter so much, and you can use however much you want. You just kind of scoop it out.
Right, because with the oils and the vinegars, you do have to worry about it going bad, like it turning on you. So
yeah. That's why I didn't want to do the recipes, because there's so many and so many variables. So
right, and you have to, like, that's the thing about, like, when any of the things, I mean, you have to have a trusted source. If you're canning, if you're doing something to preserve it, you have to be sure that it's just a really trusted source and not a random Instagram post of a
so with that,
DIY.
I'll make a pitch for using just extension recipes. So there's lots of canning and food preservation recipes that come through cooperative extension sites with major universities, and they are good.
Well, that's an awesome recommendation. Before we wrap up, we have been talking about garden journaling throughout this garden season. Garden journaling can help you track what works, what doesn't, what bugs you may see in your garden, growing patterns, weather patterns, or any diseases or insect damage your plants may experience. We're encouraging all participants in these clinics to try out a garden journal. At the end of the season, we'll review the garden journals together as we put this year's garden to bed and plan for 2023. Some important things to note this week in your garden journal. What crops should you have a plan to preserve? What plants are past prime and need to be cleared out of the garden? What fall plants and seeds have you planted already? And have you put any portions of your garden to bed for the winter? The peak summer growing season is on the decline, and it's time to get fall vegetables in the ground before it's too late. Be sure to know where your plants are planted, how they are growing, the weather, the pests, and any signs of disease. If you have interplanted any flowers with your vegetables, it's also good to make a record of that so you can see if they have any impact from year to year. To find additional resources, including great articles, weed profiles, and more resources, visit fairfaxgardening.org. We've been hosting these plant clinics since the summer of 2020, and we all were recorded and are on the VCE-Fairfax County YouTube site. In addition to the virtual plant clinics presentations, you can see 6 presentations from our fall 2020 Lunch and Lawn series, reviewing fall turf care and winterizing your lawn, as well as our 2021 Spring Lunch and Lawn series and our Zone 7 Garden series. There's a lot of great speakers and informative topics. Thank you everyone for attending. And thank you to our speakers.